We will share. Welcome everyone to our In the Room Zoom on grieving in relation to others. I'm Blythe Lord, the founder and executive director of Courageous Parents Network. My daughter Cameron died at the age of 2 almost 22 years ago. And as with most of the topics for what we do, I have a personal experience with it. This one in particular is near and dear to my heart because I remember it at the beginning as being quite challenging. My husband and I had very different grief responses. And also I went back to work and there were just a lot of things. So this topic really resonates with me. We are joined tonight by Taryn Schuelke, who is a bereavement expert and educator, formerly at Texas Children's Hospital and now an independent consultant. Taryn has done some work with Courageous Parents Network before, and we have got to see just how wise and deep her wisdom is. Taryn's also a mom. And then 3 parents who have committed their time tonight to share, and they will introduce themselves. This session is being recorded. We will send out a link to the recording afterwards. You can share it with whoever you wish. We encourage you to share it. We are going to have a sort of the flow of the evening is there will be a program piece where Taryn does more didactic educational piece. Then we'll hear from each of the parents in response to what Taryn has shared and describing their own experience. And then we will open it up for your questions. Please do not be shy. This is a safe place. I believe it has ever been thus. Depending on how many people here end up being here, you could, we had 100 people register. If we get that many, which would be shocking, we'll just put questions into the chat. But if we stay at about this size, feel free to raise your hand using the hand feature in Zoom, the little hand thing, and I will call on you to contribute. So you can either put your question in the chat or you can raise your hand and then you will unmute yourself and ask your question. And then these things have a way of running themselves organically because you guys are beautiful people. So, all right, without further ado, I will have Taryn introduce herself, and then perhaps we'll go Amy, Melissa, Katie. Just introduce yourselves briefly, and then Taryn, you can take, well, actually, Amy, Melissa, Katie, you go first, and then Taryn, you introduce yourself and move into the educational piece.
Perfect. So thanks, Blythe, for inviting me to this wonderful program tonight. My name is Amy Graver. I'm a mom of 4. My daughter Lauren was diagnosed with a pediatric cancer called rhabdomyosarcoma at the age of 7. Lauren happens to be a twin, and Lauren died from her cancer at the age of 10, and I've been bereaved for 5 years.
Melissa?
Hi, this is Melissa, and can you hear me and see me okay? This is Melissa. My daughter Natalia, she had AML at the age of 16, and she died 14 years ago this year, and of course her death profoundly changed my life, and for sure the life of my husband and my daughter. So thank you so much for having me here.
Thank you, Melissa. Katie?
Hi, my name's Katie Hurlbut. I'm a mom of 3. My son Luke is 9, and then I also had twins. So my surviving twin Anna is 7.5, and then her twin sister Ella passed away right at over 7.5 years ago from complications from a heart surgery. So she got MRSA sepsis. So it's been a journey, but I really appreciate being here and having the opportunity to visit with all of you.
Thank you, Katie. And I know for those of you whose names and faces I do recognize, I know that there's a range of child loss represented here. Some of you, your child died a number of years ago. Some of you, your child died within the past 9 months. So there's a wide range here. And I just want to acknowledge it. Some of you may be actively parenting your child, anticipating the possibility of them dying, and there's absolutely room for that. I know for some parents take comfort in seeing what might be their future, and hearing from parents who are now bereaved. If you are one of those parents for whom your child is living, I hope that what you hear here tonight provides a modicum of comfort. That doesn't feel like the right word, that you can do what understandably feels like an impossible thing. And it is impossible, but everyone here who is bereaved is actively doing it. And that can be you too. Okay, so without further ado, Taryn, hand it over to you.
All right, thanks, Blythe, and thank you all so much for having me. It's always an honor. My name is Taryn Schuelke. I am a grief and bereavement specialist. I have a master's degree and a certification in thanatology, which is just the study of death, dying, and bereavement. I have over 10 years of pediatric healthcare experience, and I started out that experience as a certified child life specialist, working with families whose children were dying. And then the last 6 years of my experience was in pediatric palliative care, actually providing bereavement care to families. So this is something that is absolutely a passion, is near and dear to my heart. It's something that it is truly an honor to step into a sacred space with families in this place. So I'm just thankful to be here. Like Blythe mentioned, I'm currently working as a healthcare operations consultant, and I am thankful to be able to provide education tonight, as well as my favorite part is actually getting to talk with y'all. So that is what I'm hoping to do tonight, is actually just set the stage. I'm going to share my screen real quick so I can get my slides up. But I have a lot of content in here, and my goal is not to hound you with content because it can be very overwhelming. But my goal is to actually touch on a lot of topics so that we can have a really quality, fruitful discussion whenever we have that time. So I'm going to try to keep it to about 20 minutes so that we can talk a lot with each other. I hope that works out for us well. One of my favorite parts, and something I took a lot of pride in my work when I was doing grief work full time, was being a conduit of sorts to parents. It's something I found myself doing often, was connecting with parents, meeting them where they're at, and then connecting them with the things that they need and the people who they need to know. And so that's what I'm looking forward to tonight, is being a conduit to each other and to this very long, large, elaborate topic of grieving alongside others. And just to kind of get us started, I want to make sure, like Blythe mentioned, we've got all kinds here. We have people who are fresh in their grief, people who are further out in their grief, people who are anticipating the death of their child. And there is a space for you here, a part of this discussion. I hope that you will take my words and whatever hits right or feels right to you, receive it. And then if something doesn't feel right, let it go. I'm human, I'm fallible. I love doing this work, but I don't always get it right. I'm trying. So just let go, whatever doesn't work for you. And that's my hope for y'all tonight. It is a privilege for others to enter into your grief space. It is not their right. And I want to start this conversation with that very important point. It is not other people's right to enter into your grief. It is their privilege if you allow them in. And we all have different schemas of what grief means and how it functions within our body to each of us. And so it is normal that sometimes those don't match. Sometimes we don't match with each other. And that's totally normal. And we'll talk about that tonight. And I also want to make sure that we focus on the fact that true empathic connection with other people in our grief can really be healing and very powerful. So let's start with anticipatory grief. Blythe mentioned, and you saw in the waiting room, there was a slide about anticipatory grief. What it means, this word, is the experience of anticipating the death of your child. And there are a lot of things that are very individual about that experience, that feel lonely, that feel like nobody gets it. And there are a lot of things in that experience that a lot of people go through as well, that you are not alone in, that others have experienced as well. And I put a few things up here on this slide. It is by no means comprehensive, but I wanted to highlight the fact that planning, asking questions, life questions, questions from your doctor, questions of each other, making keepsakes, experiencing very normal and real denial that this can't be happening, and thinking about the location if you have that opportunity of where is your child going to die, and if you got a choice, where would that be? These are very common things for parents to experience as they anticipate the death of their child. But we're talking about being in the presence of others tonight. And so when I think about anticipatory grief as it relates to others, to me, that means, how am I going to interact with them? You might be asking the questions of yourself: who are you going to tell? Who are you not going to tell? And what exactly are you going to say about anticipating this death? And then involving people. Who are you going to involve in this experience with you? Who are you not going to? There might be other children in your family, maybe not even siblings, but nieces and nephews. Are you going to involve them at the end of your child's life? What about extended family? What about extended family who you don't have good relationships with? What about people that you care deeply about that are not even your family, but are in your community and are your friends? And how do you want them involved? And these are big questions. These are big things to have to think about as a parent. And it takes all and more of your energy to go through this and anticipate the death of your child. So I want to throw out a few things that maybe you will expect from other people, things that you might need to think about that could happen as you're anticipating the death of your child, during the time that your child is dying, and beyond, after, in your grief. These things happen. People will have all kinds of ways to engage with you, including, but not limited to, uncertainty, not knowing how to interact with you, being really awkward with you. You might feel awkward with them. Morbid curiosity. People ask really intrusive and uncomfortable questions, and they don't really know what they're doing and what to say and how to ask. And there's just this sense of morbid curiosity. You might be surprised by loving and compassionate generosity and connection from other people, maybe people you didn't even expect. And also this thing at the very end, I mentioned denial before, but others might be in denial that your child is dying and have all kinds of opinions about how this is going at the hospital. They might have all kinds of opinions about how to put on a service for your child, or all kinds of opinions and avoidance about not going there with you in your grief. It's just too hard for them. It's too much. It's too real. They feel awkward. And so they just avoid it altogether, which is extremely, extremely unfortunate. And it leads to this kind of a situation where maybe there were people in your life who, while your child was ill, after diagnosis, maybe during your hospital stay, they went into hiding. They didn't know how to interact with you. They didn't know how to engage. And now that you're anticipating the death of your child, or your child is dying or has died, they come out of hiding. What do you do with that? What do you do with those people? You have a choice. You have a choice. You can shut them out, or you can let them in. And so this is a very important part of starting to set boundaries. And we'll talk about this a lot tonight. Boundaries are so crucial when you're interacting with others in your grief. And when I think about boundaries, I think about maybe they didn't show up and now they're showing up again. How are you going to set boundaries with them now? What information will you allow them to know? What information will you allow them to share with others? What kind of support will you accept from the people who are showing up and they've been in hiding? Are you going to address the fact that they pieced out on your life for a while and now they're back? Or are you just so tired and you have negative energy that you don't have time to go there with people, and you don't have the ability to meet them in that space where you're calling that out? So are you going to give them a clean slate, provide tabula rasa, and just move forward from here and see what happens? But it's important to wonder and think about, how are you going to react if they fall short again? Very important. And this actually, this comes up forever, unfortunately, but people come out of hiding throughout the entire grief experience. So let's talk about expectations, because we all have them. It's a normal human experience to have expectations of others and what you think they should do and how they should show up in your life at any given point. And it's going to be true that people will fall short and people will rise above. So just know that people are going to fall short. And usually there are exceptions, but it's because people don't know what to do or say, and it usually isn't personal. They might just feel awkward, and you might feel awkward, and that is normal. That is totally normal. Everyone experiences that. A lot of people also experience this experience of people rising above and making true compassionate connection with people, where your burden feels lighter and they get it, and it's a breath of fresh air, and it makes you want to weep because finally someone is there for you and you can be yourself, your whole self with them. That's also very normal. And if you don't have someone like that in your life, I am truly sorry. And I know that this is a community where you can find people like that. And so I'm just so thankful that you're plugged into CPN. I would be remiss if I didn't mention trauma, because if you have experienced the death of a child, if you have experienced the hospitalization of your child, you have most likely experienced trauma for yourself, your own trauma. And so this actually is a beautiful illustration that I came across during a recent conference from our bereavement center here in Houston, Texas. They put on a lovely conference, and this stuck with me because it is so true, and it is an illustration of what happens to a T of when you've experienced trauma. And it's this concept of a window of tolerance. And you've got a window of, how much can I tolerate from other people right now? How much can I tolerate from external stimulus coming in at me right now as I'm grieving? And that window will shut and open and shut and open as it wills, because it's trauma. And within that, you're going to experience hyperarousal and hypoarousal, where you're maybe really short, really sharp, can't handle it. you have outbursts, you're angry, or you are numb and checked out and just not even really there, daydreaming. In an early grief, this window is exceptionally small. And so you're often fluctuating between these two spaces of hyper and hypoarousal, often if you've experienced a trauma. And so what this might feel like for you, just in real life, taking this big concept and bringing it down, is you will probably feel pretty dysregulated often. And you might speak before you think. Your body might have a physical response toward someone coming at you with questions, or someone just doing something a certain way that is not how you expected it to happen. And you could be explosive, you could be passive, but your window's small, and so you're very dysregulated. But as your window opens, your tolerance gets bigger. You're actually able to breathe more steady. You're actually able to think up here in your front brain, where all your logical thinking is happening. You can think to yourself, that is not the battle I'm choosing to fight today. I'm going to let that one go. And you can be more grounded. And so the goal, obviously, is to get that window open. This is an entire topic that we could talk about for hours. But just know that that might be why you're feeling this way. And it might be that you've experienced trauma. This is one of my favorite diagrams to use with families, because to me, when I first saw it, it was like my mind was blown. I felt like that made so much sense. And it really spoke to the experiences that I have heard so many parents talk about in their grief. And it's this idea of comforting inward into the circle and dumping out in the circle of grief. And so it's concentric circles, and you as the parent and the siblings are right in the center. You are the one who's experienced the death of your child. And then the next center out is your close relatives and friends. And then the next is other people. And then finally, the very outer circle is your community, your coworkers, your place of worship, where you go to the grocery store. I mean, you name it. So we've got all these people we interact with in our life. And the important thing here is parents and siblings often find themselves comforting out instead of dumping out their grief, instead of comfort coming in to them only. So I'm here to tell you and give you the permission slip. It is not your job, Mom. It is not your job, Dad, to have to comfort the people in these outer circles. That's not it. That's not your job. So if someone says, you should be more compassionate to me, I'm also grieving, you can say, well, Taryn told me I didn't have to. So the thought here is that you, as the parent and sibling, are able to dump your grief out onto others while you receive comfort. And these close relatives and close friends, they can dump out to their outer circles, right? So that they can comfort into you. That's your permission slip. When you need a permission slip, think of this little target in this grief circle here. So let's talk about some specific relationships. Always siblings come up in this topic of how do I grieve while parenting my other children? And y'all, it is hard. It is a hard job. It's something that you can't get right because you are grieving. So what is right here? Nobody knows. You just do the best you can. And you're there to affirm that relationship that, yes, you are still a sibling. You will always be a sister. You will always be a brother. And these kids are going to go through something called re-grief as they get older. With each new developmental stage, they're going to grieve in a new way. And they're going to have different questions, and they're going to bring things up in the grocery store, and they're going to talk to their friends at school about it. And there's all kinds of new ways these kids are going to grieve, and it might catch you off guard. It might take you by surprise and think like, oh, we haven't, gone there yet. No, they haven't asked that yet. That's new. Haven't had to answer that question yet. Well, here we go. So just be there to normalize and keep a routine as best as you can, using really concrete, honest, compassionate language with them, staying open. It's very hard to be open when you're grieving because you feel very closed off with your children, your living children. Staying as open as possible to whatever they are experiencing can be so comforting and build such lovely trust between you and them moving forward. And guess what? You get to have boundaries with your living children too. That's okay. Here's your second permission slip. You get to set boundaries with your other kids. You can say, hey, I don't feel like talking about that right now, but I do want to talk about it with you. Maybe we can wait till we're in the car and out of the grocery store line. Why don't we, maybe spend some time this weekend when we have more time to sit down and it's not so late at night when we're all kind of sleepy and sad. Let's talk about this another day. That's okay. And acknowledging them and just being present for them. Spouses, partners. Oh, yeah. This one is also very difficult because you've got two grown adults. Both have experienced this intense, awful, never should have happened to you experience. And you're each your own person with your own grief schema, with your own ways of talking about this and doing this and being in the world now. And it is very hard. It is possible. It is absolutely possible to grieve together in a healthy way, but it is absolutely normal to grieve together and be in conflict and feel very unhealthy at times. That is totally normal. So my hope here is to give you little granules of things that you can keep in your pocket to maybe help that run a little more smoothly in your home. Or if you are separated from your child's other parent, maintaining that relationship still, because you two are connected in this way. And so finding a healthy way to do that too. So acknowledging the differences, talk about the elephant in the room. Like I like to talk about this all the time and I like to fire hose everything that's in my brain and you don't. And that can be difficult. That's hard for us. Just acknowledge what that is. Finding points of connection. The Gottmans talk about this all the time in their research on connection and in marriage and being in partnership with each other, turning toward each other. It's very easy to turn away. It's very easy to isolate and blame and point fingers. Find things to turn toward each other. It doesn't even have to be big. It can be like hey, I love you. And that's the best you can do today. Or hey, I'm having a really hard day. Thank you for doing the dishes. I really appreciate that. Turning toward each other, hearing each other, not listening to respond, but listening to listen. Talking to myself here too. These are very hard things, even when you're not grieving. And to add grief on top of this, it's just difficult. But these are the things that will help you make those connections and be present with each other. And then refocusing your perspective. Sometimes we get so in the weeds with what we're thinking and how we're feeling and each of the little things and all of the complications and the tangle of grief and trying to untangle it, that we need to focus our perspective back to, hey, we had a child who died and we have to be here for each other and do the best we can every day. And it's okay. It's okay to say some of these things on the screen. Can I just have a minute alone? I'm really in my feelings. I just need a minute to process and be alone, but I'll show up for you here in a minute. Just give me some time. And it's okay to ask for support from your spouse, from your partner, to say, hey, I'm in a dark, dark place and I need you to stay home with me today. Please call into work. Please stay with me. I need it. There's your third permission slip. And to wrap us up with this didactic, how can we invite others in? How do we do it? very obscure. It's very abstract. It's like, how do I engage with other people? How do I communicate? Let's try to find some ways and talk about some ways to do that. So I think one important thing, if you're still just feeling completely lost about how to engage with others in your grief, is to find that one or two people who have shown themselves trustworthy and capable. Pick them. Pick them, ask, text, say, hey, I need you today. Be bold, but pick them and try to just start there with that one or two people that you know are trustworthy and showed up for you in the past. Again, with the boundaries, I know we're going to have some good discussions about this in a minute. You can say, that's not helpful to me to hear. Here's what's helpful to me to hear. Or, yeah, thank you for inviting me to that party. I'm just really not up for that, but maybe we can meet up in a few months. I would love to be invited again in a few months or something like that. You have to allow yourself enough space to process what you've gone through and enough rest. You can't do this if you are unrested and unprocessed, because that window is going to be a little bitty window. And so we have to have rest and time to process what you've gone through. And I know we have therapists in the room tonight. And so find a therapist, go to therapy, find a way to process, talk with a friend, journal, sleep when you can. I know for some of you, sleep is not restful. Sleep is torrential. So finding other ways to rest that are not sleep, ways to help your brain calm and reset, even while you're awake. And then just try one thing a day, or if that's too much, one thing a week that is a connection with others. Make a connection with someone and just try that very simple thing. Again, using truth and authenticity, we need to minimize hurtful comments. You've got them at you all the time. People are saying hurtful things to you all the time. So setting these boundaries and saying, this day is actually really hard for me. This is when we had our diagnosis. So I might be a little cranky today. My friends, like, can you give me some grace, please? And then ways to connect with people. Ask them to participate when you're connecting with your child. If you're going to your child's graveside, invite someone to come with you. If you are looking through old videos or pictures, send one or two to a friend and say, oh, this just brought me so much joy to see this today. Or, hey, I was thinking about this moment. It made me really sad, but look at her sweet little face. Isn't she sweet? Find a way to connect. Some people haven't heard your story and you've been trying to figure out a way to tell them. Be thoughtful about it, invite them in, and share your story with them for the first time. This can be extremely emotional, obviously. So make sure you're in a great space, as good as possible, to have that conversation and share the story. And ask people if they have a memory of your child. I find it's always so soothing to hear new memories that I had never heard before. And I know for bereaved parents, that is especially true. And it's always lovely to hear what other people think about when they think about your child. So some final thoughts before we get to talking with each other, but I just want you to remember that this grief is yours and you are the gatekeeper of who gets to come into it. It is true that when we make good connections with others, it's healing for our souls and it can regulate you, especially if you're in trauma. And you have all kinds of permission slips from me tonight. And so whatever it is, you just say, Taryn told me it's true, and I will do what I need to do. And you need to rest, find ways to rest, because this is a lot of energy to interact with other people. And that is all I have. So I'm going to unshare. I hope I did.
Thank you, Taryn. Thank you so much. I have heard you talk on this before, and yet I have sort of been at versions of this myself for a long time, and I've learned so much from what you've shared here. And I'm struck by how so much of how we as individuals respond to our grief and respond to other people responding to our grief is particular to the individual that we are. So there, as many people as there are types of ways of responding. And so everything is going to be like a little chemical reaction, right? The chemical reaction that you're having unto yourself, and then the chemical reaction that you're having in your family, with your other children, if there are other children, or with your partner, with your colleague. There's just so many ways that it can show up that make it tricky. And also just like, what type of person are you? Are you a goer? So I'll just keep going and I won't notice how I'm feeling, versus I'm so in my feelings. That's all I can do is be in my feelings. Amy, perhaps can you go first and just share any thoughts you have based on what Taryn shared and what resonated for you?
Absolutely. And Taryn, I just loved those slides, especially the slide about the window and how it opens and closes at different stages of your grief. I'm thinking about an encounter I had with my sister when my window was very, very small. But I think after, like, early in my grief, and my daughter's been gone 5 years, and it's still early in my grief. But after multiple negative encounters, I kind of realized that I need to educate people, or and advocate for myself, because if I don't do that, then I'm mad about the conversation afterwards, and I feel like I've lost control. So I'm getting way better at telling people, your comment is not helpful to me, or please don't say that to a bereaved parent, or I can't talk about this right now. And for people that there's going to be people in your life that want to fix you, and you can't fix me. I'm broken, and my brokenness is not something I want you to fix. It's not something you can fix. And my brokenness and me are my package now. That's who I am. And you're going to have to deal with it, because this is just who I am now. So I want you to sit with my brokenness, me and my brokenness today, how I am today, how I am on her birthday, how I am on her diagnosis day, how I am on all those days. I'm different people, but I just don't want you to fix me. And so I'm getting better about advocating for that. I had to tell my sister one time, just listen. I don't need advice. I just want to vent. And so kind of some days are like that, but I am getting better about advocating for myself and just helping people understand you can't say these things. It's not helpful.
Thank you, Amy. And that gets easier to say those things?
With practice, I think it does. I really do. I practice on easy people, like people in the grocery store, like that I'm never going to see again. Don't say that. You can't say that to me, or don't say that about my child, or whatever. Please don't say that about, that. And then it's harder with people you're close to. It's harder with relatives, but the more you practice, for me anyway, it's getting easier.
Thank you. Katie, how about you? You're nodding.
Yes, what really struck me was, and I've seen it before, the circle about, you can grieve in and then dump out. And that was a big lesson for me, because I have issues with boundaries and I'm a big people pleaser. And so I found myself, comforting my family and my friends, which, to be honest, was quite exhausting when you're already numb and, in shock from everything that's happened. And so that was something I really had to learn with time, was to put those boundaries up to protect myself and to protect my family. because, that's ultimately what matters the most, that it's not my job to help other people grieve the loss of my child. And so that's definitely one lesson. And then the other was what Taryn touched on with husbands and wives. I am definitely the fire hose that I just want to talk it out and, share about her and talk about memories and just talk about how I'm feeling. And my husband is not that way. And in the beginning, that was definitely a process that we had to work through, because I interpreted that as, is he not grieving her? Does he not miss her? And that wasn't the case. It was just that he processed it much differently than I did. And so I also had to get to the point where, I would just say, I just need to talk about this. Right now it's okay if you don't want to talk about it, but I just need you to listen. And I don't need you to fix it, because he's a huge fixer. And obviously there's nothing that can fix this situation. So, I just need you to tell me that you miss her too. I mean, most days that's really all I needed to hear. And I just needed him to give me a hug. And so that was definitely something that we learned with time. And then the last thing was with returning to work. I know everyone has different situations, but my husband worked in a relatively, or still works in a relatively small office. So he unfortunately had to immediately return back to work. He didn't have much time off after we lost Ella. And so the first week, I would say, was difficult for him, in seeing his coworkers and, having to either explain what happened or, having his coworkers, just tell him how sorry they were. Whereas I work in a medical office and I'm a provider there. And so a lot of my patients, I only see like one time a year. And so I really struggled with going back to work, because it wasn't like a one time, like, okay, if I can just get through the first week and have to, share my story and explain what happened and why I've been gone from work, then I'll be okay. It was like I needed to mentally prepare myself for, I'm going to have to share my story over and over and over, until I see all of the patients that, knew that I was pregnant and knew that I was expecting twins. And again, that was where boundaries came into play, where there were days where I could not talk about it over and over and over again with all of my patients. And so I would have to say, that this is really difficult for me to talk about. And it's just a really emotional day for me. So, thank you for understanding that, and just kind of cut it off from there. But I think that was something I had to learn to protect myself too, that I didn't need to share my story with every single person that I saw. That if I didn't feel emotionally up to it that day, then it was okay to put that boundary up.
Yeah. And I think you're naming something important, because you're not dishonoring your child when you choose not to talk about it. Like that doesn't, the sanctity of your relationship with your child is supreme, and how much you talk about them is not an indicator of anything other than whether you're in the mood to share or not. Thank you, Katie. And Melissa, how about you? What resonated, or what were your versions of what Taryn was talking about and what Katie and Amy have said?
Yes, I think, for sure, the first struggle after the death of Natalia was how each one of us at home were dealing with it, and how we expected everyone in our household to be dealing with it. I know, for my husband and I, we grieved differently, and he would get just very mad. And so it became where he was like, okay, let's not talk about it. There's another one. And I think it took some time. It took some time for us to figure out how we could maybe grieve together, and have some common ground. And I think, and I'm saying like, a few years, I think then finding, how could we honor Natalia, and then establishing a scholarship that kind of brought us together, and gave us some like this common ground on talking a little bit about our feelings and kind of, okay, so how are we gonna continue on as you know, husband and wife, I think. But it took a while. It took, you know, for sure, time. And I think on my part, it took a while for me to understand. I think maybe like what Katie was saying, how just because he didn't grieve the way I grieved, that didn't mean that he didn't love her or he didn't remember, or he, you know, he just simply was grieving in a different way. And it also happened with my daughter. My youngest daughter was 14. And so she had just started high school. And, you know, for me, sometimes it was so very hard to see her kind of move on, you know, like from one day to the other. She was in high school and doing her thing. And it was just like what the, like, what is happening? You know, like, does she not understand that her oldest daughter, her oldest sister has died? And again, it certainly took some time, and definitely some reading and, you know, talking to other bereaved parents to understand that her way was different. Her way is the way that a lot of teenagers do grieve. And you know, she certainly there has been moments in her life, now it's been, like I said, 14 years, where that grief came in big, huge waves for her, right? And one of them would be our first vacation together without Natalia, where all of a sudden she realizes, well, this is not so much fun because I'm traveling with two adults, and like this is, or you know, maybe in college when, you know, she had friends who had others who had like a sister, right? And the friend would express how, you know, how close they were. You know, she would call on the phone. It's like, you know, I want my sister. You know, how am I going to have my sister? So it, you know, it certainly has been a process, I think, for all of us to understand how it is okay to grieve differently. And I think if you know, I wish I knew all of this early on, because I think the process would have been, you know, so much easier. But it is okay to grieve a little bit, especially I think at the beginning, right? To give each other some space, to grieve at your own pace, because, you know, the emotions are just so raw. And another thing that I thought of a lot was when I would, and I actually did it just last week when a friend, I met the mom of one of Natalia's closest friends. I met her, and I hadn't seen her now in many years, and she started crying. You know, we were talking about Natalia, and she started crying, and so I was comforting her. You know, it's like, it's okay. You know, it's okay. But you know, so many times that we I think as parents, bereaved parents, are called brave many times, right? And I think because we're seen as these brave people, then it is okay for them to not be so brave in front of us, and for us to have to comfort. And yes, I agree with Katie. It feels very exhausting, because, you know, who is there to comfort you and to kind of lean a shoulder for you to cry and just cry and sob. And so I think it is important to find those people that you know are there to just cry and, you know, and sob. And I guess one of the things that I have found over the years very interesting, that at first I was almost expected, maybe talking about friends, right? Or friends, or maybe society in general, how we are expected to be strong. That word resonates all the time. You're so strong. I wouldn't be able to do it. I wouldn't be able to put it all together, to send my child to school, to go to school. I mean, you're just so strong. And then, and I think because we're women, maybe because, I don't know, maybe because this is the way I was, like Katie said, you kind of conform into that or question yourselves, like, sure, I'm not that strong. I mean, I'm crying everywhere, but okay, yeah, I need to be strong. I just need to put it together. I can't be crying all the time. But then now, many, many years later, I find sometimes now that I feel so much healthier and I feel like I have healed. Many times women will come, or their parents would come and said, well, I am surely, you will never get over it. You will always suffer because this is just, terrible, and you will. And then I question myself, maybe I should be suffering more, because how can I say that I'm healed? And so I think it's important to maybe put those barriers, right? Those boundaries of it's okay to feel however we feel, right? If we're not feeling strong, it's okay not to feel strong. And then in those days that we feel okay, it's okay to feel okay, even though maybe other people are telling us that we should be feeling like the world has ended and just crawl in a hole, right? So anyways, those are I think, it's for sure a learning process, a process of a lot of growth, for sure.
Thank you, Melissa. Yeah. I appreciate that, like the forward thinking, and that last bit you said, like, I've been having good days. You don't have to explain yourself to that. You don't explain yourself when you don't want to talk. You don't have to explain yourself when you're feeling good. It is such a private matter, like our relationship with our children, our relationship with our people. These are very private things, but it's such a big deal that it becomes public. And then how do you reconcile this private with the public? I want to invite people to put questions in the chat or to raise their hands. I do know that one question we had that got emailed was, this is for Katie and Amy and Melissa, whether there are any particular tools or therapy tools, like a book or a process or a therapist that you worked with that was particularly helpful to you, that you would say something like this you would recommend for others. Katie, do you want to go first? Or okay, Melissa, you raised your hand.
I can go, it's okay. So yes, I really personally hit a wall 6 months after Ella passed, where I just was not coping well and just had difficulty functioning in everyday life. And that was really when I realized I needed to talk to someone. And to me, it was most helpful to be able to talk to someone and let it all out there without judgment. And it was not anyone that was like within my family. It wasn't my husband. It wasn't my mom. And I could just lay it all out there, like the good, the bad, the ugly, and the thing that was the most helpful for me from my counselor was really, truly just hearing that everything that I was feeling and everything that I was going through was normal, because no one in my family, none of my friends had ever lost a child before. So there really wasn't anyone that I could turn to say, like, this is how I'm feeling. Did you feel this way too? And so my counselor personally had lost a sibling, earlier on in her life. And so she had experience in watching how she grieved, plus how her parents grieved through that as well. And so that was really helpful. The other thing was that I had a lot of anxiety after Ella passed. And I think many people go through that once you lose one child, your bubble is kind of burst and your safety net is not there anymore. And so part of you will always worry that you're going to lose another child. And so especially with Anna being her twin, I was very, very anxious that something would happen to her. And the thing that really helped me was just laying all my anxieties out there. And, just she would ask and say, what are you worried about will happen? Okay, if that happens, like, what would you do? And just helping me to realize that, all of these things that I'm worried about most likely are not going to happen. But if they do happen, like, we will be okay, and so that was really beneficial for me.
Thank you, Katie. Melissa?
I think there were a couple of, one of the things that I think was helpful for me, I went to a couple of support groups, not necessarily like very early on, but I would say maybe a couple of years after. And I think, I don't know that the group itself was necessarily super helpful. However, I think knowing that there were other people that were thinking and feeling like myself, like the way I was feeling, I think that was very helpful. Not, again, kind of that, I think at first, especially at the beginning of grief, I would feel like, surely this has never happened to anybody else before, and surely I'm not managing the way I should be managing it, right? But I think when you hear other people's stories, you begin to feel like, okay, yes, this is normal. And I also found it helpful, kind of in the same vein. My mother-in-law lost 3 children, and of course then her granddaughter. And I think I saw her as an example of what I could be, because she was a woman who was very faithful, but also a woman that exudes love and compassion and understanding. And I kept thinking, I want to be like her. Somewhere along the line, I want to be like her. I want to be somebody who is grateful for having had Natalia, for being able to share all the wonderful moments that I had with her. And so I think, and again, I think maybe it's part of when you are in part of a community of bereaved parents, you can see others who have survived and who have maybe thrived in maybe reaching out to others. And you realize, okay, yes, my life is never going to be the same. My life is never going to go back to the way I knew it. And, these people have changed, but it is possible. It is possible. And I think especially at the beginning of grief, that can give you a little bit of glimpse of hope.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Wow, your mother-in-law, 3 children. That's a lot. Amy, anything that was particularly helpful to you?
Yeah, what Melissa said resonated with me, Blythe. I thought, well, one thing in particular that helped me was I got a card from a person in my community that I didn't know. I mean, our kids had gone to the same school, but her kids are older. She also has twins, and her twin daughter died. And she sent me a card that said, I know, I've been there. I know what you're feeling. I just want to let you know I'm thinking about you. You don't ever have to respond to this, or you can respond to it, or you can respond in 2 years or whatever. And here's my email, here's my address, here's my phone number, here's all different ways. And if you don't want to, that's okay too. And I ended up connecting with her. We went out for coffee probably like 9 months after Lauren died. And it just felt so good to talk to another bereaved parent who had a twin situation as well. And we spent probably an hour like top this of stupid things people had said to us, which was just super comforting, just because she had been there as well. And so I try to think about that. I just learned of another girl in our community who died of cancer. I don't know the family, but I'm hoping to do that same thing for that parent and that mom that was done to me. And then to Melissa's point, I think about when I was growing up, and there was a boy in my 5th grade class that died in a car accident. And then in 7th grade, a girl on our block that died from a car accident as well. And I would see these two moms on my block where I lived, and in the small job I worked in a bakery, and I would see the other mom in the bakery. She'd come in, and just how they handled their grief. And I thought, after Lauren died, I'm that mom now. I'm that same mom that I thought about as a child. And I just think about how they both dealt with their grief. One, I remember the woman who lived on our block, my mom was talking to a neighbor and said, you know, she's going to go to the Mayo Clinic. She's having trouble swallowing. They can't figure it out. And as a kid, I thought, she can't swallow the fact that her daughter died. I know this is it. I know this is what's wrong with her. And I was in 5th grade, but I thought, I bet that's what's wrong with her. And then I saw the other woman just out and about, and I don't know if I'll ever be that woman, but I think I can be somewhere in the middle. I haven't reconciled with the fact that the hand I was dealt, but I also feel like I need to be more like out there and help families like mine. It'll be better for my soul, and to show, and it's what works for me to show my love for my daughter. But seeing other bereaved parents, I guess, has been a model, good and bad, for me.
That's beautiful. I see, Kristen, you have a question. Kristen McKay, do you want to unmute yourself and ask your question? Also, before you go, I want to say it's 5 minutes past the hour. We'll go for maybe 5 more minutes. If that's, I mean, obviously leave as you need to. Hopefully Taryn and Amy and Katie and Melissa, if you can stay for another 5 minutes. Okay, Kristen, what's your question?
Hi, yes. First of all, thank you all so much. And so my question involves my son has the same genetic disorder that my little brother passed away from. And one thing that I kind of have seen come up a lot for me is my dad's grief, and how that, my son kind of brings that up. And sometimes I wonder, like, how I should work with him too. My son hasn't passed yet, but his has. And I, along with my whole family, have kind of always been the shut down type, and not really talk about it. I think I talked about it with my sister in a real way just recently, and it's been about 7 years. So, but I see that now with my son here, that it's starting to kind of bubble up for everyone. And I'm trying to figure out a way for me to step out of my own denial with my son, to then be able to, be there for my dad through the grief of my brother. So I'm sorry if that's too specific, but.
Wow, that's profound, right? That you were the child, and now you're the mother, but you're the child relating to the father now that you're the mother. Taryn, this is for you.
Kristen, thanks for sharing and speaking up. I know it's not easy, especially in a room full of people. So that's rough. I mean, and just like, I feel like it's really important that you said this, because families are complicated and grief is complicated, and there are so many dynamics that can exist within grief. And it's not in isolation. Everybody around you has their own grief that they're experiencing, and you may yourself have experienced other grief recent to your child dying. Like it is very complex. And so I wish I had like the golden ticket answer to give you because that's what I want. That's my wish for you. But I think I would just say that one moment at a time kind of thing. It's super cliche, but I don't think there's any other way to do it. And if you feel like you're in a space where you can be present for your dad, that's beautiful. That's absolutely great. And that feel free, like feel free to go there, but just know that it might become too much very quickly, And so I guess my advice, if I were to give you advice, would be to try to imagine how that might go and then have an escape plan and think through, what am I going to say when I've hit my limit? And how am I going to know that I am open and able and ready to be able to have this conversation and be present with my dad and his grief? And if it never happens, if that window never opens that you can be that for your dad, it's okay. Because you are anticipating a death, and this is a lot. So I would say give yourself all the grace you can possibly give yourself. Think through and imagine how it might go and the things you might want to say, and imagine how you would hope to show up for your dad. But if it doesn't go like that, just know it's okay. There's a lot of really great resources out there that can help you think through many possibilities, think through things that might be helpful to say, talking to other parents. Maybe there's somebody in this group who has experienced something similar or had to talk to their own father or mother in their own grief. And maybe you could connect and kind of talk that through with someone. Do y'all have anything to add? Amy, Katie, Melissa? Amy?
So Kristen, my mom and dad lost their oldest daughter stillborn. So after my daughter died, my dad and I talked about it. And my dad had never really talked about, we recognized my sister's birthday and things like that, but only like how he said the way that I was open with my grief and open with talking about it really helped him. And we've talked more about my sister since my daughter died than I've learned more about her than I have my whole life. And I guess I just want to, like, for you, I feel like I want to protect your grief. This is how you want to handle it, and however you want to do it. Maybe you're going to be a model for your dad. Maybe your dad will think, this Kristen is getting comfort from talking about it, or however it is. But ultimately, I want you, I guess, to be selfish with, like, you have to be there for yourself. Like, you're the priority for you and your son, and then your dad, and you and your dad will have this link in common that's unbelievable. But right now, I think your focus is you, and then your dad's grief can come along with yours, if that makes sense.
That's excellent. That makes so much sense. He's an outer ring guy right now.
He's on our, yeah. And his grief is there, but yours is present and palpable. And you'll have that in common, but you do it how you need to do, and then talk to your dad about it.
Right. That's the complex part, right? Because based off that circle, I'm in his inner circle, but he's in my outer. So there's the complexities of life. But thank you all so much. That answered well.
Before I sign off, I want to name the thing that I found most complicated for me, for which I needed a counselor to help, which was certainly the dynamic of how my husband and I were relating, but also my children. My older daughter was 4 when her sibling died, and she became, as Taryn said, as she reached new developmental milestones, she re-experienced the loss of the death of her sister, who was 2 years younger, and just, she loved her so much. And I wanted to take care of myself, and I also had to take care of her. And there were times that I resented the hell out of her needs when all I wanted to do was take care of myself. And that begat a whole set of complicated feelings. Like when you are resenting your little child because they need their mother, like that makes you feel terrible. But you're feeling terrible for this other reason too. And I will, to use Taryn's language, like give yourself grace, because it's fair enough that you don't want to deal with your child who doesn't want to go to bed because all they want to do is be with their mom because they're sad. But in fact, you want them to go to bed so you can go be alone because you feel like crap. And that's just, I think grieving alongside your grieving other children, if you have them, is perhaps the thorniest piece. And I definitely brought in therapists. I'm just saying that. Yeah. So, Taryn, do you want to have any parting words before we sign off?
Sure. I know each of you are probably thinking of your very own experiences and thinking through your own complexities, and it took a lot for you to show up tonight. And so I just applaud you for that. It's extremely, to use the word, brave to come be a face in this room. And even if you don't feel it. And I am just thankful to CPN that you have created this kind of a community where you can have these conversations, where you can talk about the real things that are extremely hard and unimaginable, and also find a place of hope. Because what I heard tonight is a lot of hope, and I heard a lot of striving for healing and trying to find ways through. And that is extremely beautiful. And thank you for blessing me with that. And Amy, Melissa, Katie, I cherish you, all three of you. Blythe, same to you. It is always such an honor to hear you talk about your children. And I appreciate y'all so much.
Thank you, Taryn. Thank you, Taryn. Thank you, Amy. Thank you, Katie. Thank you, Melissa. Thank all of you who gave your time tonight to show up. We will be sending out a follow-up email with a link to the recording of this for you to have for future. You can lean on Taryn's slides and the wisdom of the parents, the moms who've talked tonight. CPN is always here. If you haven't joined Courageous Parents Network, I would encourage you to please do so, because then as a member, if you join, you can just go right. I'm putting this into the chat. You get an email with all the new content that we put on, whether it's a new blog or a new parent video or a clinician video, plus you hear about the events coming up. So if you haven't joined, please do. Thank you, and just stay well. It's a privilege to be part of this community and see your faces. Okay. Good night. I'm going to end.